Cedric was 38 years old, made $69,000 a year operating a light rail vehicle for New Jersey Transit, and he knew, with the kind of certainty that settled deep in a man's bones, that his marriage was over. The realization didn't come from a slammed door or a tearful confession. It arrived on a gust of sage-scented air at his mother-in-law's Thanksgiving dinner table, served on a platter of public humiliation. The table was groaning under the weight of the feast. A 20-pound turkey, glistening with butter, sat center stage. There was a vat of macaroni and cheese with a 3-cheese blend that cost $40 alone, a collard green dish simmered with smoked turkey wings, and candied yams so sweet they made your teeth ache. The Forest Hill house, a sprawling colonial that his in-laws had bought in the 90s, was filled with the warm murmur of family. But the warmth stopped short of Cedric. His wife, Sade, was laughing. It was a bright, tinkling sound that normally made his heart feel lighter. But right now, it was the sound of a nail being hammered into the coffin of their 9-year marriage. Her brother, Damien, had just delivered the blow. Damien, who wore a pair of $200 Gucci loafers to a family dinner and worked in some vague tech consulting role that never seemed to produce any actual income, leaned back in his chair, a smug look on his face. He'd been holding court all evening, talking about crypto portfolios and seed funding rounds, using words designed to make everyone else feel small. "The problem is thinking small," Damien announced, gesturing with a fork. "People get stuck in their little 9-to-5s, their little pensions. They can't see the bigger picture." He glanced directly at Cedric. "Take you said, good man, reliable. But you're broke. You work for wages. Sade should have married Mason." The name hung in the air, thick and unwelcome as smoke. Mason was Sade's ex-boyfriend, a private equity guy who drove a Porsche and owned a condo overlooking the Hudson. The comparison was brutal and intentional. The room went quiet. Every aunt, uncle, and cousin froze, their forks halfway to their mouths. Cedric felt a hot flush creep up his neck. He looked at Sade, his wife of nearly a decade, the woman he'd woken up next to that very morning in their shared Newark Heights condo, the one with the $4,200 sectional sofa she'd picked out. He was waiting for her to defend him, to tell her brother he was out of line, to say that her husband's worth wasn't measured by his tax bracket. Instead, she laughed. It wasn't a nervous titter. It was a full, genuine laugh, her head thrown back, her intricate braids shimmering under the dining room chandelier. She playfully slapped Damien's arm. "Oh, stop it, Dee," she said, but there was no heat in her words. It was the chiding of an accomplice, not the defense of a wife. And in that moment, watching her align herself with her brother's casual cruelty, Cedric understood. They saw him as a stepping stone, a comfortable, stable, but ultimately disappointing choice. The $69,000 a year light rail operator broke. He felt the weight of every dollar he'd ever spent, not on himself, but on them. The quiet wire transfers to her mother to cover the $4,500 in property taxes, the $5,000 he'd given Damien 2 years ago for a sure thing app that never materialized, the down payment on this very house, a secret gift he'd made to his in-laws that they all believed had come from a lucky stock market bet made by Sade's father. 9 years of silent support, of being the bedrock, and all it had earned him was mockery at a table he helped set. He said nothing. He simply picked up his knife and fork and cut into a piece of turkey, the metallic scrape against the porcelain plate the only sound he made. He chewed slowly, deliberately, the food tasting like ash in his mouth. He could feel their eyes on him, waiting for a reaction, for an argument. He gave them nothing. He was a train operator. He knew the power of silence, of moving forward on a set track, ignoring the noise from the platform, and in the cold, quiet depot of his heart, a final destination had just been determined. He just had to wait for the right time to pull the brake. Have you ever been in a situation where someone who should have had your back completely betrayed you in public? It's a feeling that cuts deeper than any private argument. We'd love to hear your story in the comments because sharing these moments helps us all feel a little less alone. The weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas were a masterclass in domestic normalcy. On the surface, nothing had changed. At 4:15 a.m., Cedric's $45 digital alarm clock would beep, and he'd slide out of the bed they shared, the one with the $600 Egyptian cotton sheets Said insisted on. He would move through the quiet darkness of their 1,800-square-foot condo, the glass and steel of the Newark Heights building still asleep. He'd put on his NJ Transit uniform, the fabric crisp and familiar. His $89 Timex watch, a gift from his late father, was the only piece of jewelry he wore. It was reliable. It told the truth. He would make coffee in the $700 Breville machine that was more complicated than the control panel of his light rail vehicle. He never drank it. It was for Said. He would pour her a cup, add a splash of the oat milk she liked, and leave it on the marble countertop next to her $200 iPhone. It was an act of service, a ritual he'd performed for years. But now, it felt different. It felt like gathering data. Each morning was another entry in a logbook of a life that was no longer his. Said would stir as he was about to leave, her voice thick with sleep. "Have a good day, baby." "You too," he'd reply, his voice even. He wouldn't kiss her. He hadn't. Not really. Since that day. A peck on the cheek was the most he could manage, a gesture as hollow as the condo felt. He would walk to the garage, the air cold and sharp in his lungs. He'd get into his truck, a 2022 Ford F-250 Lariat. It was a beast of a vehicle, deep blue, with a sticker price of $68,000. He'd paid cash for it. Said thought he'd financed it over 7 years. It was one of many things she didn't know. He'd bought it for its utility, for the hauling he did for his side business. A small property management company he ran that consisted of 2 duplexes he owned outright in Vailsburg. The rental income from those 4 units was a quiet, steady stream of an additional $7,200 a month that Sad knew nothing about. She just saw the truck as a big, unnecessary expense for a man on a transit salary. He'd drive through the pre-dawn streets of Newark, the city he loved. He'd see its bones, its grit, its beauty. He'd arrive at the iron-bound depot, the air thick with the smell of diesel and electricity. He loved his job. The steady rumble of the train, the rhythm of the stops, the faces of the people he carried every day, nurses, construction workers, students. He was a part of the city's circulatory system. It was real, tangible work. It paid $69,000 a year, and it came with a pension that after 15 years of service was already worth over $450,000, another number Said had never bothered to ask about. While Cedric was running the rails, Sadie was living the life he funded. One afternoon in mid-December, he came home earlier than usual because of a shift change. He walked into the condo and heard her in the living room, on the phone with Damien. "I know, Dee, I know," she was saying, her voice a soothing murmur. "He's just, you know how he is. He's sensitive about the money thing." A pause. "No, of course not. He has no real ambition. I mean, he's a good man. He pays the bills. But he's not going to build an empire." Cedric stood in the hallway, his work boots silent on the polished hardwood floor. He was a ghost in his own home. "Mason would have bought you that car by now," Damien's voice squawked faintly through the phone. Said sighed. "Don't. It's not helpful. Look, I'll work on him. The holidays are coming up. I'll see if I can get him to loosen the purse strings for your launch. He's probably got a little saved up in that 401k thing he's so proud of." Cedric backed away silently. He went into the kitchen, made some noise, opening the refrigerator, and then walked into the living room as if he'd just arrived. "Hey, baby," Said said. her face lighting up in a brilliant, false smile. "You're home early." "Shift change?" he said, his voice a low rumble. He looked at the shopping bags on the floor beside the sofa. A new dress from a boutique in Montclair, a $2,400 Burberry piece, a new handbag, something Italian and leather that probably cost another $1,000. "Just a little Christmas shopping," she said, gesturing to the bags. "Looks good," he said, his eyes empty. He knew his paycheck had been direct deposited that morning. He also knew that over $3,000 of it was already gone. He didn't say a word. He was just an observer, watching the final act of a play he was no longer participating in. He was waiting for his cue. The cruelty wasn't confined to that single Thanksgiving outburst. It was a slow, steady drip, an erosion of respect that became more apparent to Cedric now that his eyes were open. He started noticing the small things, the casual dismissals that he had previously brushed off as Sade, just being Sade. A week after Thanksgiving, they were in the car, his F-250, driving to a Christmas market in the city. An ad came on the radio for a financial planning service. "Is your retirement on track?" the cheerful announcer asked. Sade reached over and changed the station. "God, so boring," she muttered. "They act like everyone is just counting pennies for their golden years." She glanced at him. "You should call them, though. Probably right up your alley." Cedric kept his hand steady on the steering wheel. "My retirement's fine, Sadie." "Is it?" she asked, a hint of condescension in her voice. She was scrolling through her phone, looking at pictures from a friend's vacation in St. Bart's. "I mean, the pension is nice, I guess. It's safe. But it's not real wealth, is it? It's not freedom." "It's guaranteed," Cedric said, his voice flat. "It's not dependent on a market whim or a risky bet." "It's also not a yacht in the Caribbean," she said with a little laugh, as if it were a joke. But it wasn't. It was a judgment. She showed him her phone. "Look at Tiffany's pictures. Mason took her. Remember Mason?" He remembered Mason. He remembered Damien bringing him up at the dinner table. He remembered his wife laughing. "I remember," he said. The two words were heavy, solid things in the cab of his truck. He felt the weight of the $68,000 vehicle around him, a fortress of steel he had bought and paid for, a fact she was conveniently unaware of. She thought they were making a $950 payment on it every month. In reality, that money was being diverted from his paycheck into a private investment account she didn't know existed. Another night, they were having dinner at a restaurant in the Ironbound, a place he liked with authentic Portuguese food and no pretense. The bill came to $78. Cedric put his debit card down. Sade looked at the card with a faint wrinkle of her nose. It was the joint account debit card, the one his NJ Transit salary went into. It was the only account she ever looked at. "Don't you have one of those fancy credit cards? The ones that get you points for travel?" "This works fine," he said. "Damien says you should never use a debit card. He says it's what people who live paycheck to paycheck do," she said, parroting her brother's flawed financial advice. "He puts everything on his Amex Platinum. He says the key is to use the bank's money to make your money work for you." Cedric thought of Damien's perpetually precarious finances, the loans that were never repaid. "Damien also lives with your parents half the time because he can't make rent on his own place," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. It was the first time he'd pushed back. Sade's eyes flashed. "That's not fair. He's an entrepreneur. It's a different lifestyle. It's about taking risks, something you wouldn't understand, sitting in your little train all day, going back and forth on the same track." The insult was clear. His job, his life, his very character, it was all a monotonous, uninspired loop in her eyes. He was the boring track that led to her exciting destinations. He didn't respond. He just signed the receipt, left a generous cash tip for the waitress, and walked out into the cold Newark night. He was done explaining himself. He was done defending the quiet dignity of his work. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place just after New Year's. He was in his small home office, a corner of their second bedroom, paying bills online. He managed all their finances, a task Said had gladly abdicated years ago, saying it was too confusing. He logged into their joint account and saw a transfer for $1,500 to Damien. The memo line read, Startup Seed Money, Phase 1. Cedric stared at the screen. She hadn't asked him. She had just taken it, $1,500 from the account that paid their mortgage, their utilities, their groceries, money he had earned. He clicked through the statements. He saw it then. It wasn't the first time. There were smaller transfers over the past few months, 300 here, 500 there, all to Damien, all without a word to him. She was funding her brother's fantasies with his labor. The brother who had called him broke. The wife who had laughed. He didn't feel anger anymore. That had burned out weeks ago, leaving behind something cold and hard and clear. He felt a profound sense of calm. He now had all the information he needed. He opened a new browser tab and logged into his personal accounts, the Property Management LLC, the investment portfolio, his private savings. He looked at the numbers, the assets accumulated through years of quiet discipline and work she had deemed unimportant. He wasn't a man on a simple transit salary. He was the bank, and he was about to foreclose. Cedric began to move his money. It was a quiet, methodical process, executed in the early morning hours, before his shifts. He started with his direct deposit, a few clicks on the NJ Transit employee portal, and his bi-weekly paycheck was rerouted. Instead of flowing into the joint checking account he shared with Said, 90% of it now went into his private, high-yield savings account. The remaining 10%, enough to cover his portion of the mortgage payment and a few small shared bills, continued to land in the joint account, creating the illusion that nothing had changed. It was a digital sleight of hand. Next, he turned his attention to their shared savings. There was about $20,000 in it, an emergency fund he had painstakingly built. He initiated a transfer for $18,000, moving it to his personal brokerage account. He left $2,000 in the shared account, a plausible-looking balance that wouldn't raise immediate alarm. The transaction would take 2 business days to clear. He timed it for a Friday, knowing Said rarely checked the accounts over the weekend. He sat in his small office, the glow of the monitor illuminating his face. He felt no guilt. This wasn't theft, it was reclamation. He was securing assets that were undeniably his, earned through thousands of hours of operating a train through snowstorms, heat waves, and holiday weekends. He was protecting the fruits of the very labor she and her brother mocked. While he fortified his financial position, he played the part of the dutiful, unassuming husband. He continued to make her coffee. He listened to her talk about her day, about her friends, about Damien's brilliant new idea. "It's some kind of revolutionary logistics platform," she explained one evening, her eyes bright with unearned excitement. "It uses AI to optimize delivery routes for small businesses. He says it's going to be bigger than Uber." Cedric nodded, sipping his water. "Sounds ambitious." "It is. He's so smart," said. "He just needs a little capital to get the prototype built and secure the patents. He's talking to some angel investors, but he needs to show them he has some skin in the game." She paused, looking at him with an expression he now recognized as manufactured sweetness. He was saying he needs about $30,000 to really get it off the ground. Cedric didn't react. He just looked at her. He saw the calculation in her eyes. She was gauging his response, laying the groundwork for the ask she believed would come from her. What she didn't know was that Damien, emboldened by the secret infusions of cash she'd been giving him, was about to overplay his hand spectacularly. The phone call came on January 18th, a Tuesday. Cedric was off that day. He was in the garage, changing the oil in his F-250. His hands were greasy, and the familiar scent of motor oil filled the air. His phone, resting on the toolbox, buzzed. It was Damien. Cedric wiped his hands on a rag and answered, putting it on speaker. "Ced, my man." Damien's voice was slick with false bonhomie. "How's the king of the rails?" "I'm good, Damien." "What's up?" Cedric said, his tone neutral. "Listen, bro, I'm calling you because I've got an opportunity of a lifetime, and I thought of you. You're a smart guy, a practical guy. You understand solid investments." Cedric almost laughed. The whiplash from being called broke at Thanksgiving to a smart investor in January was dizzying. "Is that right?" "Yeah, man, I'm launching my tech startup. It's a game changer. I've got venture capitalists lining up, but I need to close my seed round like yesterday. I'm giving my inner circle a chance to get in on the ground floor." "Inner circle," Cedric repeated, the words tasting like metal. "Exactly. Look, I need $30,000 to lock it down. It's basically just a bridge loan until the big money comes through next month. I can pay you back double in 6 months." Double said. "Think about it. That's a $60,000 return." It was a preposterous, amateurish pitch. No real investor would fall for it. It was designed for a fool. It was designed for the man Damien thought Cedric was. "And one other thing," Damien continued, his voice dropping as if sharing a secret. "I need to pick up some server equipment in Delaware this weekend. No sales tax down there, you know how it is. My Beamer is in the shop, so I was hoping I could borrow your truck for a couple of days. That big F-250 would be perfect." And there it was, the full, audacious scope of their delusion. They didn't just want his money. They wanted his assets. The very truck he'd bought with his hidden wealth, they now saw as a tool for their own enrichment. They wanted to use his strength to build their fantasy. Cedric looked at his hands, covered in the grease and grime of real work. He looked at the powerful engine of the truck he maintained himself. He thought of the Thanksgiving table, of Said's laugh, of the casual, repeated insults. The moment he had been waiting for had arrived. It was his cue. The train was pulling into the station and the doors were about to open. It's one thing to be insulted, but it's another level of audacity when that same person then asks for a massive favor. Has anyone ever experienced that kind of brazen hypocrisy? Tell us in the comments what happened and how you handled it. Cedric took a slow, deliberate breath. The air in the garage was cold, but he felt a placid warmth spreading through his chest. It was the feeling of power, not of anger. It was the quiet confidence of a man who knew every inch of the track ahead. "Damien," he said, his voice calm and even, the sound carrying clearly over the speakerphone. "Let me make sure I understand. You want to borrow $30,000 and my truck." "Yeah, man, exactly." Damien's voice was eager, expectant. He thought he was closing the deal. "It'll be a huge help. I'll have the truck back to you by Sunday night, full tank of gas." Cedric picked up a clean rag and began to wipe the grease from his hands, each motion precise. "No," he said. The word was not angry. It was not loud. It was a simple statement of fact. A closed door, a locked gate. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line. Damien had clearly not prepared for this outcome. "What? What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no, I will not be giving you $30,000. And no, you cannot borrow my truck," Cedric said, his voice maintaining its unnerving calm. Whoa, hold on, Ced," Damien stammered, his slick persona cracking. "I don't think you're understanding the opportunity here. This is a chance to double your money. Are you crazy?" "I understand it perfectly," Cedric replied, "and the answer is no." "Is this about Thanksgiving?" Damien's voice turned petulant. "Man, I was just kidding around. You can't take a joke? It was just family talk. The money you're asking for, the $30,000, Cedric said, ignoring the question. That's a lot of money for a guy like me. You said it yourself, I'm broke, remember? I just work for wages. He was using Damien's own words, twisting the knife that had been stuck in his back and presenting it back to him, handle first. Damien was sputtering now. That's not... I didn't mean it like that. Look, just forget that. This is a business deal. Then as a business deal, the answer is no. I don't think it's a sound investment, Cedric said. As for the truck, I need it this weekend. He didn't, but Damien didn't need to know that. A new, more desperate edge crept into Damien's voice. Sadie said you'd help me out. She said you guys would support my vision. And that was the final move of the chess game. The checkmate. Sade? Cedric said, feigning mild surprise. Well, then you should be talking to her. The finances are a partnership. If she thinks it's a good investment, then she should fund it from her half. He knew with absolute certainty what would happen next. Damien would hang up and immediately call Sade, furious and confused. Sade, confident in her access to what she believed was their shared wealth, would go online to make the transfer herself, to smooth things over with her brother, and she would discover the truth. Yeah, okay, fine. I'll talk to my sister, Damien said, his voice tight with anger and confusion. He hung up without saying goodbye. Cedric placed his phone back on the toolbox. He screwed the cap back on the new quart of oil. He closed the hood of the F-250, the sound a solid, satisfying thud in the quiet garage. He had not raised his voice. He had not insulted. He had simply held up a mirror, and the reflection had shattered them. He went inside and sat down in the living room, on the expensive sofa Sade had chosen. He waited. It took less than 10 minutes. His phone rang. It was Sade. Her voice when he answered was a frantic, high-pitched whisper. Cedric? What is going on? Damien just called me, freaking out. Why were you so rude to him? I wasn't rude, Sade. I just told him no. No? What do you mean no? It's for his business. It's for my family. Our family is right here in this condo, he said quietly. And that business is a fantasy. I'm not funding it. You're not funding it? Her voice dripped with disbelief. It's our money, Cedric. I'm going to transfer it to him right now. I can't believe you. Okay, he said. What do you mean, okay? I'm doing it. I know, he said. Go ahead. He heard the frantic tapping of her nails on her phone's screen. He could picture her, standing in the middle of a department store, her face contorted in a mask of indignation. Then, silence. A long, drawn-out pause. He could hear her breathing, quick and shallow. Cedric, she said, her voice completely different now. It was small, confused, and laced with the first threads of panic. Where is the money? The savings account. There's only $2,000 in it. He stayed silent. And the checking account? She continued, her voice rising again. There's barely enough to cover the mortgage. Where is our money, Cedric? He let the question hang in the air for a moment, savoring the weight of that one critical word. Our. There is no our money, Sade, he said, his voice as calm and steady as the train on the track. There is the money I earn, and it is safe. The line went dead. The strike was complete. The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound he had ever heard. The fallout was not a single explosion, but a series of cascading failures, each one a direct consequence of their own actions. Cedric watched it all from a calm, protected distance. He had built a financial fortress, and now he was simply observing the storm rage outside its walls. The first wave was a flood of text messages. From Sade, 8:47 p.m. What did you do with the money? This isn't funny, Cedric. Put it back now. From Damien, 8:52 p.m. What the hell is going on? Sade says the account is empty. Are you trying to ruin me? I have a deposit due tomorrow. Cedric was at home, eating a simple dinner of chicken and rice he had cooked for himself. He read the messages and felt nothing but a quiet sense of finality. He did not reply. Sade, 9:15 p.m. My card was just declined trying to buy groceries. Declined. Cedric, I am not playing. This is humiliating. Damien, 9:30 p.m. You will regret this. You're a selfish bastard. You were always jealous of me. Cedric washed his plate, dried it, and put it away. He had changed the passwords on all his personal accounts that afternoon. He had also contacted his lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Franklin, and scheduled an appointment for the following week. The next day, the real panic set in for them. Damien's startup opportunity was clearly a house of cards. He likely owed money to someone, a deposit on an office lease or a payment to a developer, and he had been counting on Cedric's $30,000 to cover it. Without the funds, his deal collapsed. Damien, 10:12 a.m. I lost the lease. The investors are pulling out because I missed the deadline. This is your fault. You destroyed my dream. Cedric was at work, piloting the 10:08 a.m. train from Newark Penn Station. He glanced at the message during a stop at Military Park. He thought about Damien's dream, built on a foundation of other people's money and a mountain of arrogance. He put the phone away and focused on the track ahead, the light turning green. Sade arrived home that evening in a fury. She threw her $800 handbag on the floor and stood before him, her face a mask of rage. You have to fix this, she demanded. You have to put the money back. Damien lost everything because of you. Cedric looked up from the book he was reading. It was a biography of a railroad tycoon. No, Sade. Damien lost everything because he built a business on a lie and expected me to pay for it. You co-signed that lie. It was our money, she shrieked. Was it? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Did you earn it? Did you work the overtime shifts? Did you get up at 4 a.m. every day for 15 years? Or did you just spend it? She stared at him, speechless. For the first time, she was seeing him not as her compliant, stable provider, but as a man with his own will, his own boundaries. Where is it? She finally whispered. It's in my accounts, he said simply. The duplexes in Valesburg that I own. The brokerage account you didn't know I had. My pension, which you never asked about. The money is fine. It's just not your money anymore. The truth landed in the room with a physical weight. The condo they were standing in, the mortgage, was in his name. The F-250 in the garage was titled to him alone. The life of casual luxury she enjoyed was a service he had provided, and that service was now terminated. The consequences rippled outward. Her mother called a week later, her voice confused. The monthly $500 transfer she had been receiving for years, a gift from Cedric to help with her expenses, which Sade had allowed her to believe came from her, had not arrived. Sade had no way to explain it and no money to send. Damien's situation grew more desperate. He had to give up his apartment in Newark Heights and move back into his childhood bedroom in his parents' Forest Hill home. His leased BMW was repossessed. The word spread through their social circle that his big tech venture had spectacularly imploded. He was no longer the visionary entrepreneur. He was just an unemployed man living with his parents. Sade was trapped. Her credit cards, which Cedric had always paid off from the joint account, were maxed out. With no income of her own and no access to his, she was for the first time in her adult life truly broke. She was living in a home that would soon no longer be hers, surrounded by expensive objects she couldn't afford to maintain. The $2,400 Burberry dress hung in the closet, a useless symbol of a life that had evaporated overnight. She had laughed when her brother called her husband broke, never realizing her husband was the only thing standing between her and that very same reality. The humiliation she had felt when her card was declined was nothing compared to the slow, dawning horror that her entire lifestyle was a facade, paid for by the man she had so casually disrespected. The divorce was quiet and swift. Ms. Franklin was efficient, her legal billing rate of $750 per hour a testament to her skill. When Sade realized the extent of Cedric's privately held assets, the two income-generating properties purchased before their marriage, the robust pension, the investment account solely in his name, she understood she had no leverage. The condo, purchased by Cedric with a down payment from his own savings, was his. The truck was his. The life she thought was half hers was built on a foundation she had no claim to. She received a small settlement, the legally required portion of the marital assets accumulated from the joint account, which, after her spending, was not a significant sum. It was enough for a security deposit on a small one-bedroom apartment in a less fashionable part of town and a few months of living expenses. All the luxury items, the designer bags, the expensive furniture, the high-end kitchen appliances, were hers to keep. They were also hers to move. Cedric helped her pack. It was his final act of service. He watched as she wrapped the $700 Breville coffee machine in bubble wrap, her movements slow and defeated. She was a different woman from the one who had laughed at the Thanksgiving table. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a brittle, weary sadness. "I don't understand why you did all that," she said softly, not looking at him. She was gesturing vaguely around the condo at the evidence of his secret wealth. "Why you hid it? Why you let us think you were just a train operator?" Cedric stopped taping a box and looked at her. "I never hid it, Sade. I just didn't advertise it. It was our future, a foundation. You just never bothered to look at the blueprints. You were too busy looking at other people's houses." He thought about telling her everything. About the 9 years of supporting her family, the thousands of dollars given to Damien, the property taxes he'd paid on her parents' home. But he didn't. What was the point? It wouldn't change anything. The knowledge would only serve as another layer of her own shame. He had made his point not with words, but with actions. Their final meeting was in a sterile conference room at Miss Franklin's law office to sign the last of the papers. Sade was there with a court-appointed lawyer. Damien was not there. Cedric heard he was now working a retail job at the local mall, the irony of which was not lost on him. When it was over, Sade walked with him to the elevator. "I'm sorry, Cedric," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "For everything. For laughing." He looked at her, at the woman he had once loved enough to build a world for. He felt a pang of sadness for what they had lost, for the future that would never be. But he felt no anger. That had been replaced by a deep and abiding peace. "I forgive you, Sade," he said, and he meant it. "I forgive you for my sake, not for yours, so I can move on." He paused. "I hope you find what you're looking for." The elevator doors opened. He stepped in. She remained outside. The doors closed, and he descended, leaving that chapter of his life on a higher floor. The true weight of a person's character is often revealed not in how they handle success, but in how they respond to being humbled. Do you believe people can truly change after an experience like this? Share your thoughts on forgiveness and second chances in the discussion below. 3 years later, the sun, a brilliant orange ball, was setting over the Passaic River, casting long shadows from the glass towers of downtown Newark. Cedric stood on the observation deck of his new home. He had sold the condo in Newark Heights and bought a penthouse apartment in a restored industrial building in the Ironbound, not far from the depot. It was smaller, but the view was magnificent. It was a view of his city. He was 41 now. His face had a few more lines around the eyes, but they were from smiling, not from stress. His life was simpler, richer. He still operated the light rail. The $69,000 salary had grown to $78,000 with seniority and cost of living adjustments. He loved the rhythm of the work, the sense of purpose it gave him. It kept him grounded. The income from his Valesburg properties was now entirely his. He had used it to invest in a third property, a small commercial building that he rented out to a local bakery run by a young family. He enjoyed being a landlord who was fair and responsive, the kind of landlord he wished he'd had when he was younger. His greatest joy, however, came from his new role at the depot. 2 days a week, he wasn't on the rails. He was in a classroom, mentoring new operators. He was a natural teacher, his calm demeanor and deep knowledge of the system earning him the respect of the younger generation. He saw himself in them, their pride in the uniform, their nervousness, their ambition. He taught them not just how to operate the machinery, but how to be professionals. He taught them about the pension, about financial discipline, about the dignity of a life built on steady, honest work. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small because of the work you do, he told a class of new recruits one afternoon. He stood before them, a proud black man in his crisp uniform. His deep brown skin was luminous in the fluorescent light of the training room. This job is the lifeblood of the city. You are carrying people to their dreams, to their families, to their futures. There is no shame in that. There is only honor. He had found a new kind of love, too. Her name was Annika, an architect who was passionate about urban renewal in Newark. They had met at a community meeting about a new park. She loved his quiet strength, his unwavering integrity. She knew all about his finances, not because he boasted, but because they shared their lives with transparency and mutual respect. She celebrated his discipline. She didn't mock it. Tonight she was coming over. He had cooked. Nothing fancy, just a simple, flavorful meal. The scent filled his apartment. On his kitchen counter, next to a bottle of wine, sat a framed document. It was a letter from the first recipient of the Cedric Wallace Vocational Excellence Scholarship, a fund he had established at the local community college for students entering trade programs. The scholarship was for $5,000. He had funded the first one with the money he'd made from selling the $4,200 sectional sofa Sade had left behind. He looked out the window again at the twinkling lights of the city he served. He thought about the word Damien had used to describe him. Broke. It was a word that meant a lack of money, but Cedric had learned that true brokenness had nothing to do with a bank account. It was a poverty of character. It was a deficit of loyalty. It was an inability to see the value in a good man's steady heart. By that definition, he had been the richest man at that Thanksgiving table all along. He had just been sitting with the wrong people. Now he was building a new table, surrounded by those who understood that true wealth isn't what you have, but what you build, what you share, and the legacy of integrity you leave behind on the tracks. What we learn from stories like Cedric's is that self-worth should never be tied to someone else's approval or their definition of success. The most valuable assets we have are our character, our skills, and our integrity. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that message today. Thank you for being a part of our community.